These are the 5 lies of the fitness industry that I'm going to expose to you, and I guarantee that you have bought into at least one of them. But I'm going to provide evidence, and hopefully I can convince you that some of these are completely untrue. First up is that metabolism is going to significantly affect your ability to gain or lose weight. Now, yes, metabolism is a thing, but it's not a thing in how you think it is. First of all, resting metabolic rate is really what we're talking about when it comes to metabolism, and resting metabolic rate is how many calories would you burn if you lied in bed and did absolutely nothing for the entire day. Outside of that, your caloric expenditure is going to come from your movements, both large movements like going for a walk, and small movements like moving your hands while you talk. Kids with ADHD tend to have a hard time putting on weight because they're constantly fidgeting and jittery, and that has a caloric expenditure to it. Now, sometimes people just tend to move less throughout the day. That's fine, but it doesn't mean that the world is against you and that your metabolism has you doomed to obesity or vice versa. You can tell me you're eating a lot, but your metabolism's really fast, and generally, these people aren't eating very much. Now, here's the evidence to back this up. First of all, here's a study where they showed obese versus non-obese people, and there was only an 8% difference in their resting metabolic rate. Now, yes, 8% is considerable. It works out to 95 calories per day. Is that substantial? Well, yes and no. It's substantial because 95 calories per day works out to about a 10-pound weight gain per year, but it's not substantial in the sense that cutting 95 calories is not crazy. These people who tell you that they're eating 1,000 calories a day and not losing any weight are not telling you the truth. They're quiet snacking. They're not moving much. They're eating more than they say. They're over-reporting. In fact, nutritional labels can over or under-report legally by 20%. So that person who says, I'm eating 1,000 calories a day, might be eating 1,200. And then they might be having some extra snacks that they don't know. They might be putting more oil on their food than they think. They're actually at 1,600, and maybe they're very small, move very little. But it's really an 8% difference according to this study. Next up, there is no metabolic difference between men and women. Really, it comes down to how much muscle mass do you have and what's your total lean body mass. That's it. And muscle mass is particularly useful to talk about here because we're talking about metabolically active tissue. Fat is not metabolically active. So yes, if you're a more muscular person, you will raise your metabolic rate. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. One really interesting concept here is that even if we compare able-bodied people to paraplegics, it is still explained by lean body mass. And lastly, resting metabolic rate is independent of training status. If you have similar lean body masses, but you're very fit, you do not burn more calories at rest than a very unfit person. Really, you're just going to tend to move more and do more because you have a more abled body. This is not to be confused that your body composition won't be different if you're fitter, because if you're fitter at rest, you're burning more fat than you are carbohydrate. But regardless, it doesn't affect your resting metabolic rate. Lean body mass is really what we're talking about. And this is the big contributing factor to resting metabolic rate. The more muscle that you can put on that's going to soak up glucose from your bloodstream, that's going to consume calories at rest, the better off you will be for long-term weight management. So a big problem with something like Ozempic is people are losing tremendous amounts of muscle. That's going to drop your resting metabolic rate and of course going to cause problems. But if you increase your fitness, you increase your activity level, and maybe you add some resistance training in, you can do this with really next to no problems. So my number one expose on the fitness industry is that metabolism has a significant impact on your weight gain or loss, because it doesn't. Number 2, recovery. I'm calling myself out here because I talk about recovery often, but really, if you're an ordinary person, you don't really need much. If you scale your exercise appropriately, you eat fairly well, and you sleep fairly well, that's going to do you wonders of good. And that should be your primary focus, and that's probably what you should stick to for the long run. But cold therapy, saunas, cutting edge recoveries, they can be good for elite level athletes who are pushing their bodies to the maximum, but not really if you're just doing an hour or a 2-hour workout every day. Let's give a comparison to someone who might need over-the-top recovery. College football players, they will practice in the morning, let's say 2 hours, practice and conditioning work. Then they'll go to the weight room for 90 minutes. And then in the evening, they'll practice for another 2 hours and do some skills. So we're talking about 6 hours a day, 5.5 to 6 hours a day total of exercise for these not even professional, but sub-professional athletes working very hard. If we talked about triathletes or Olympians or a variety of other sports, we'd run into the same thing. And these are the people who need to do absolutely everything they possibly can. And my personal opinion is that even for most of them, worrying about all of these extraordinary over-the-top recovery methods could be over the top. If I was advising someone in this position and time and money were of no consequence, I would say choose 1 or 2 cutting edge recovery things that you'd like to do. Otherwise, prioritize your food and your sleep and you'll be good to go. There's absolutely nothing wrong if you want to do extra recovery, if you'd like to get a red light bed, for sure. It is tremendously helpful and it does help you according to the research, but it's not a necessity. It's an addition. Number 3, periodizing your training doesn't actually matter. Again, calling myself out here. It matters if you're a competitor, it matters if you're an elite level athlete, but it only matters if you're 100% consistent because the layperson periodizes for themselves. Your vacation is periodizing. You didn't quite feel right, so you didn't go to the gym. You went for a mental health break because you're having a really stressful day at work. You socialized more than normal at the gym. You reduced your intensity for a variety of reasons. You had to take a work call, so the intensity of your workout was cut in half. All of those things are normal life that we have to account for that is periodizing your training. You don't need to overcomplicate things and feel like you need to train like a competitive athlete if you're not a competitive athlete. Now, yes, resting your body every 5 weeks or so when you're consistent with your training is vitally important. And that's why I do include it in every single program that I write. And it's down in the link in the description at moosecoaching.com. But this is only if you stick to the entire program. If you don't stick to the program, I fully accept and I fully encourage you to skip that deload week and go straight into some more hard work the next week. Number 4, science in exercise matters less than psychology in exercise. What the research says you should do is exponentially less important than what you will do. We have over-researched out the ass so that the layperson feels like exercise is incredibly complicated, and that's just not true. If we take it to the most broad example possible, I like to think about the body as the stupidest non-communicative device that you could ever imagine. Say, if I wanted to communicate something to this device, how would I do it? I would like to get strong. How do you communicate that to a human body? Okay, well, you push against a load that's gonna make your body think, I need to be stronger to do that. Done. Simple as that. And then recover from that. And it's really that simple. You want to do that in a bench press, really hard, squat, really difficult weights, and you will eventually become stronger. Here's some research. 1 set of 10 twice per week is enough to generate strength results in moderately trained individuals. Another one that Dr. Mike talks about, 5 to 30 reps is ideal for hypertrophy. Another example here, and something that strength and conditioning coaches will probably pucker their butts to, is that deadlifting is more similar to jumping than squatting when it comes to electrical activity of the muscle. So how much does it really matter? You could build muscle doing 5 or 30. You could build strength doing anything pushing against really difficult load. You could focus on eccentric or concentric. And we're back to, if you're extremely consistent, it does matter. And you do have to change some variables and you do have to be very careful. But if you're not extremely consistent, then worry less and do more. My 5th and final fitness industry lie is that injuries happen from poor technique. This is not true. And bear with me because I know a lot of you want to jump to the comment section right now and give me the benefit of the doubt because I do have 6 years of post-secondary education in this space. Injuries happen when a load exceeds tissue tolerance. This is either acutely, and that is, let's say you drop a barbell on your shin and you fracture your shin, or chronically because your tissue tolerance is reducing over time and eventually the load that you've been using forever is exceeding your tissue tolerance and that causes an injury. Globally, this probably makes a lot of sense to you guys, but locally is where the technique comes into play. So when you're squatting, if say you have a big knee cave in and your knee ligament snaps, well, that doesn't eliminate my argument. That is the first time that knee ligament is experiencing that type of force, so it hasn't had the period of time to adapt. But if you always squatted with caved in knees, that ligament will adapt, all of your tendons will adapt, and that is generally how you squat. Now, yes, there are patterns by which we are more resilient and less resilient, but regardless, we are highly adaptable to the point where if someone with quote unquote poor technique has done that for several years and you try to coach them in perfect technique, well, that perfect technique is exposing them in ways that they haven't been exposed before. So someone who could squat 200 kilos in their way can't squat 200 kilos in a perfect way if they've trained to squat that way in a quote unquote imperfect way. So it's not about technique, it's about changing technique. So long as you keep your technique consistent over maximal loads compared to lighter loads, your technique actually matters relatively little. And yes, this applies for back rounding in deadlifts. Yes, this applies for knee caving and squat. It applies for literally every single movement. So those are my 5 lies of the fitness industry. I hope you guys pulled something from that. Let me know what you think and what your biggest pet peeve is, your biggest lie in the fitness industry that gets on your nerves. These are some of my gripes that I see consistently, but I know you guys have them as well. Until tomorrow, lift heavy, be kind, and thanks a lot for watching.